and welcome to the first edition of Social Business. I'm Brooke Corty.
And I'm Peter Shergold. I'm the Macquarie Group Foundation Professor out at the Centre for Social Impact.
Well, at the start of each Social Business, Peter and I are going to be updating you on the key news going in not-for-profit activity and corporate social responsibility, philanthropy, volunteering.
And we're going to talk about social entrepreneurship, social innovation and social business.
Well, Peter, just firstly to kick off the show, it's the first one that we've got here on the Business Channel. What do you do at this Centre for Social Impact, your role there?
Well, the Centre for Social Impact is a collaboration, quite an innovative collaboration between 4 Australian business schools. It's headquartered at the University of New South Wales. It includes Melbourne and Swinburne and the University of Western Australia. And we intend to call it CSI, as in CSI Australia.
Well, let's get underway for this first edition of Social Business. Lots to report to you. Firstly, back in January, the Productivity Commission released its massive research report on the contribution of the not-for-profit sector. A good 440 pages worth, 3 large appendices online. Peter, you've gone through it all, I know that. Just tell us a bit about some of the recommendations from this report.
There are 38 recommendations in there, but essentially it's trying to address the enormous vibrancy of the not-for-profit sector, but the extraordinarily complicated way in which it is regulated at the moment. Regulated in terms of certification, registration, taxation. What the report really tells us is that there's a bit of a mess. There's a lot of duplication, there's a lot of opaqueness, and a lot of suggestions as to how to overcome that. I guess one of the most interesting examples is to set up a one-stop shop, which the Productivity Commission is calling a registrar for community and charitable purpose organisations. It's a bit of a mouthful and doesn't even lend itself to a good acronym, but the National Registrar, I think, is what most of us are calling it now. And
from what I understand, the report really seemed to highlight, I guess, the importance of what they increasingly call the third sector.
Look, Brooke, what's fascinating is so many of us are involved in the Brooke sector. Of the third sector. We contribute to organisations, we make donations, we're members, we volunteer. I think one of the things we didn't realise is just how big this sector is. 600,000 not-for-profit organisations, 60,000 of them are economically significant, $138 billion worth in assets, $43 billion worth of GDP each year, 8% of the workforce, and that doesn't include, of course, the volunteers. 4.6 million volunteers, another $15 billion worth of wage equivalent. This is a big sector, and it's a sector that's growing about 8% a year.
Well, let's mention something else that's happened. A function hosted by the Prime Minister Kevin Rudd back in late March or mid-March this year. A national compact was launched, and it follows almost 2 years of consultation by Senator Stevens with the community sector. The national compact really has quite a simple message, and that was really that the greatest social challenges that Australia faces is going to require some pretty innovative partnerships between government, business and not-for-profit organisations. So essentially, Peter, I mean a simple message, but how's that actually achieved? Are there any clues in there?
Well, look, this is a wonderful statement of principles to provide a much better framework for the relationship between particularly the Commonwealth Government and not-for-profit organisations, and particularly those that get government funding, either as grants or at contracts. Very important in that way. And it says all the right things about the need for advocacy and consultation and collaboration. The big question is, how can this very fine rhetoric be turned into reality? And I know Tim Costello from World Vision has been saying you need an office of the third sector to be able to do this. And I must say, from my experience coming out of Prime Minister and Cabinet, I think that's where I'd put the Office of the Third Sector.
And Peter, we've got to get back to some other surveys which I know have been pretty interesting to come out. And the first one we want to look at today in the program was one on how Australian NFP organisations have been handling the economic downturn. So this one was called Managing for Recovery. It was launched in February, and the report was conducted by PwC, the Fundraising Institute of Australia and the Centre for Social Impact. Peter, what was the kind of mood it detected in the community sector, this report?
Look, I'd have to say, in general, it was surprising but cautious optimism. When we had first done the survey back in last May, it was clear that not-for-profit organisations, what we often call charities, were doing it very tough, not just on fundraising, but across the board. Many organisations over the last year just had to lay off workers, had to even sometimes reduce the services they provided it. So when we did the survey in May, they were pretty pessimistic about the future.
And there was a key graph that came out of that, which we'd like to bring up as well, on income expectations. Just take us through, I mean, some of the details are a bit hard to see, but just talk us through the graphic and why this was so important.
I mean, this is just a fascinating response, and the key is to look at the dark grey shade. That's the number of organisations, the proportion of organisations that felt they were in declining. They had declining income coming in. So when we asked back in May, 62% of organisations, almost two-thirds, had seen their income fall over the previous 6 months. Then from there they looked ahead and they were still pretty worried. In fact, 64% or 66% thought in fact their income was going to go down further. When we then asked them in September, it had been better than expected, 52%. Still a lot, but only 52% of them had actually seen their income fall. And I think out of that, as a reason, they now looked to the year ahead with much greater confidence than they had 6 months before. So when they looked to that final part of the graph, 28% of the organisations thought their income would fall, 33% it would hold steady, but 39% of the organisations actually were positive. They thought their income would grow again in the year ahead. So quite unusual and unexpected findings, I think.
Another interesting survey has just been released as well by the Australian Institute of Company Directors. We want to show viewers. The survey basically looked at about 1,200 directors serving on boards, and really one of the interesting questions it asked was about motivation. The answers really seem to show that while a minority of directors thought serving on an NFP board would be a good development opportunity or somewhat of a stepping stone to other directorships, that wasn't actually the major reason they became board members, and that was certainly an interesting finding. Did the other motivations actually surprise you, Peter?
They did, because often people think that those who want to serve on not-for-profit boards see it as a stepping stone to move on to government boards or private sector boards. In fact, many of the people on not-for-profit boards are already on private sector boards, and the key motivation for 59% of them was the mission of the organisation. That's what turned them on. That's why they decided to become a board member. For another 34%, it's because they wanted to engage in the public policy agenda. So yeah, I thought very interesting findings.
Committed to the cause. Which
committed to the cause.
That segues nicely into the role of volunteers. There was another survey of volunteering issues from Volunteering Australia, and just briefly, if you can, just what caught your eye on that one?
Well, survey of 2,400 volunteers in 1,400 organisations, and people were asked about what they felt from volunteering. This is what I really liked, that 85% of them thought that it increased their sense of community belonging, 72% thought it increased their health and well-being. In other words, they thought that doing good was good for them, and that's a wonderful message to take out.